Good morning or good afternoon, B2B marketing and sales friends. Today we are recording a podcast episode entitled Don't Mess with B2B Influence Marketing. And to cover this great topic, we have with us Evan Kirstel, who you probably already know. And if you don't, well, this is another good reason to listen to every single piece of second of this episode. Hi, Evan. How are you today?
I am living the dream. Thanks so much.
Perfect. So I'm very, very proud to have you here today. I think somehow this is the magic of social media. I hear a lot of people, somehow complaining about the bad impact of social media on our society. Well, the way I use it, I would say I get 90% of good things out of it. So, for the little story for our audience, I wrote Evan at breakfast one morning during the Paris Air Show week in France on Twitter, asking him whether he would like to meet and exchange views. And both somehow 2 hours later, we were meeting on Dassault Systèmes chalet for a very cool experience around industry renaissance and business processes transformation. So, welcome, Evan, and thank you again for being here.
Well, thanks so much. And I would agree with your sentiment. I meet all the best people on social media around the world, and sometimes it takes 5 years or more to actually get together. But at the end of the day, it's worth it. And it's such an amazing collection of individuals that are out there with like-minded interests, and it really brings people together in ways that's quite unique. So it was wonderful to meet you at the Paris Air Show, my first Paris Air Show, and thanks for the amazing tour of Dassault and of the show. It was very memorable.
Great. Well, thanks for the kind words. And at least we're two social media optimistic people, so I like it very much. So let's get into our topic, influence marketing. This is a big topic, and well, honestly, I believe we have quite some passions in common. We have B2B, social media, and overall, how will the industrial world look tomorrow? But I'd rather let you please introduce yourself and tell us why you are deeply concerned about the topic we will cover today, B2B influence marketing.
Yeah, well, obviously, it's a personal and professional passion of mine. Influencers and influencer marketing in general has quite a bad reputation, I think, and probably deservedly so. And I promise I had nothing to do with the Fire Festival, and I don't post bikini pictures on Instagram. That would be quite horrific, actually. But in any case, it has a reputation that's quite mixed. And I use influencer in the very loosest sense, and I consider myself a sort of B2B practitioner, if you will, industry pundit, observer. But others define you, not yourself. So I'll have to deal with that title as it comes.
Yeah, so in America too, the word influencer has somehow a bad reputation. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, no, I think it's largely a B2C context. People trying to sell a product, click to buy or beauty products or pick your Facebook ad. That's generally what people understand influencer marketing to be. And in the B2B world, it really has just sort of taken off the ground as a concept of B2B influencer marketing. There have been influencers forever, right? And we call them analysts or journalists or bloggers. People who have eyeballs, people who have an audience point of view that gets widely viewed. But with the rise of social and digital, some people like myself have pretty big audiences, and we have industry backgrounds that are bringing those audiences to clients and to customers, not particularly with a view of click to buy or here's a product I can sell you today, but rather in the B2B world it's about education, insight, information sharing, engagement, that kind of thing. And so that's what I focus on in the world of B2B influencer marketing.
You mentioned something to me very important and to all, somehow specialists, I would say. You mentioned industrial background. We'll cover that topic later on, but I think this is all about the topic of credibility and getting credibility. So I'm not saying too much now about this topic, but we'll cover that in the next, in the next part of the discussion. So to take a concrete example, I saw that you were hired by Boom this summer to cover the Paris Air Show, and we actually met in person there for the first time. Do you believe that the practice of hiring external influencers will be growing significantly in the next years? And if so, why this need is becoming more and more significant these days?
Yeah, it's interesting. I do see it as a trend. We're in the early days of this, I believe, and the reason being is the media landscape is increasingly fragmented. We don't have three newspapers and three websites and three media outlets anymore. Everyone is becoming a media company, both and a consumer of media. And so we've gone from 100 traditional media outlets to 100,000 quote unquote media outlets. And companies are having to change their marketing and PR strategies accordingly. And so that means reaching out to many more to these non-traditional media outlets. And I consider myself sort of a non-traditional media outlet. It's just another way of reaching an audience, a targeted audience, and also not just reaching, but engaging with an audience. So it's becoming a two-way relationship beyond just push and publish, as we've seen in digital marketing up till recently.
I think, to be quite honest, there is a lot of noise happening in France at this very moment. So we happen to record this podcast at the right moment, and there are very interesting debates going on. And I want to mention the recent amazing work of the CMIT, it's the Club of Marketers in Tech and Fiber Content, who created this amazing white paper entitled B2B Influence. Is it a matter of gurus, leaders, or experts? Overall, studies show that influence marketing is going to become the very key of B2B marketing success. Do you think the topic is overvalued somehow?
No, I think it comes down to semantics, what we call ourselves, how we define ourselves. But I think it's really about passion. What's your personal passion and point of view, and how you can get that out to an audience. And so that I think that's what influencer marketing is really about. It's about bringing a unique perspective and point of view built on personal interest, personal passion, and credibility and experience.
And also, you were mentioning the difference between B2C and B2B. I think the word or the concept of being an influencer on social media suffered from a lot of people acquiring fake communities of people, being followed by 200K people, but having no real passion, no real community, and they were just fake. And I think now it's getting better. And I think Twitter in particular has cleaned a little bit the landscape somehow. But I don't know if you could see it, because honestly, you are very much followed. How many followers do you have at the moment, Evan?
Yeah, on Twitter it's about 250K, and
Yeah.
LinkedIn and Instagram are more, and so forth. And I think it's not just influencers who are faking themselves or faking their clients out. It's politicians, it's brands. There's a whole problem of credibility in this space, which is why content is what's really important. I mean, followers are one measure, but it's the content, the creativity, and the point of view you bring, and of course that can't be faked. I mean, that's what's most important, and I think that's being recognized now with brands and others.
The one part of the white paper I mentioned before says that, I mean, there is this question that is asked to something like 200 B2B experts in France, and the question is, can you be an influencer without producing content? So you indirectly answered that question, right? It's just, this is part of the job somehow.
Yeah, and I think it's a mix. I mean, in the old days, I call them old, but I guess they're still around. Newspaper editors, picked stories. I mean, that's what they did. They curated the news, and I think there's a role for that with influencers as well. But at the end of the day, it's about bringing some valuable content or color commentary to your audience as well. But that shouldn't discourage people. If they're interested in a topic, they should dive right in and bring their point of view and perspective. They don't necessarily have to be creating content every day, although that really, to be effective, it's about that content. It could be written word, spoken word, video word. It comes in many formats.
That totally makes sense. I want to get back on the concept of credibility, because somehow I think what it is all about. So, no credibility equals no influence, I think, in particular in our business. Is it possible to become an influencer in an engineering and manufacturing world when you are not an engineer? When does an influencer become credible enough to be recognized as an expert and not just another B2B digital native guy?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I have mixed views. I mean, I my clients are largely in the telecom and wireless domain, and I worked in that industry for 25 years, so I have a pretty strong industry background. But when I think about aviation, I've never worked in the aviation or aerospace world. But what I bring is a personal curiosity and passion for aviation, an aviation geek of sorts. And so, as long as you have one end or the other, is that personal interest and passion and desire, and interest in the space. I think that's important as well as having the pedigree and the degrees and the titles. At the end of the day, we're trying to get attention and awareness, and you can do that in many different ways. I mean, being an analyst and authority in the space is one way, but being, frankly, funny and interesting and irreverent and fun is another. And one of my favorite handles in IoT is the Internet of Shit. It's a very popular Twitter handle, and it talks about all the failures and security challenges of IoT, and it does it in a very funny and sarcastic way. So there are many ways to build an audience, and it's not always through the kind of straight and narrow.
And I mean, somehow, I think, I mean, I'm talking about my personal case. I think trying to be visible on this or that problematic makes you more educated about this. So it's somehow a positive circle where, well, at least you need the minimum credibility to start, or at least if you want to position yourself as an expert, you need to do it if you are sure you are legitimate to do it. But on the other hand, you keep learning and learning. The more you consume content and interact with people on social media, the more you learn and the more you can share valuable content. So it's yeah, I like to see it as a positive circle, knowledge circle, let's say. And I also think another aspect you mentioned before is passion. I think you can really see it pretty quickly when someone is doing it for fame or when someone is doing it just because he likes it and is just somehow when he wants to share something with people with passion, you want to follow the guy somehow. There is this emotional part of social media, whereas it's not a robot sharing good stuff to get new followers. It's a guy who likes it. And maybe even the best influencers started not even aware that they could build such a community. You know what I mean?
Right, and honestly, the more niche, the better. The more focused you are, the more niche, the more targeted your interest, the more credibility and visibility you can build. So I'd encourage people to think about their passion in a very focused way and not go into it with a particular, outcome in mind. I mean, it took me, tweeting and posting and blogging for 10 to 12 years to build an audience, and I think a lot of folks these days lack patience, in the perspective. So it's day in, day out, year in, year out, maybe decade in, decade out. And it's that perspective you need to take. It's the long game on social and digital that's important.
Yeah, if you build a community too quickly, somehow you're pretty sure that the engagement rate will not be the same. I'm sure that someone that took time to build a strong community has great engagement, while a guy, even with some follow and follow strategy, will get a poor engagement. And now all the tools that the big companies are using can detect that. So somehow all the fake people, they just somehow will disappear from the
Yeah, and I
market.
think that applies to brands as well,
Yeah,
to
yeah.
clients. I mean, the brands that have a long game and look to build community and a strategy that's solid are more effective than those that just go for the quick hits, the quick wins, the quick signups that can pay off, particularly if you throw lots of dollars at paid social, but won't necessarily build fans or engagement over the long haul.
May I ask you, I don't want you to give us your magic recipe, but can you tell us what was the process of building such a the big community you have? How did you start? Did you experience different strategies? Did it come naturally? Can you tell us a bit more about this, about the process of acquiring such a big community?
Yeah, I think again it was time, so patience, and so it's not a year or 5 year horizon; it's a 10-year horizon, and also consistency. I mean, there hasn't been a day I haven't tweeted or posted in 12 years, and so it's consistency and it's experimentation. I'm always experimenting with new tools or new platforms, even new techniques. Okay, what if I try this? What happens? Or if I use this hashtag or this set of images, what happens? And so it's willing to experiment and sort of get your hands dirty and paying attention to the peculiarities of each platform. I mean, every platform is unique and different. The algorithms are different and change. And so you have to pay particular attention to what works and what doesn't work. And LinkedIn, for example, video is on fire, both live video and recorded video. And so it's about, pushing the envelope on each of these platforms and adapting accordingly. So I think at the end of the day, it's being not simply, posting and forgetting and really not attending to sort of nurturing these platforms on a daily basis.
Let's say, well, video, you mentioned it. I think this is pretty obvious now. It's good for engagement. I think people like to see faces too. I think a lot of people, I mean, on Twitter, some people ask me if they should put themselves, I mean, they should film themselves, or if they should film only other things they can see at events and everything. Everyone is not necessarily ready to be in front of a camera. What do you think? Do you think it's important to show yourself on social media? Do you think video should be the priority? Infographics? I mean, if you had a few other tips to share with someone who wants to become a B2B influencer, what would it be?
Well, on one hand, I'm a fan of all the above. So there are only a few forms of content, right? Written word, spoken word, and video word, and then across different platforms. So to be truly effective, I think you have to do all of the above. We're doing a podcast now. I listen to podcasts basically 5 to 10 hours a day. So, and I think a lot of people are becoming like myself. It's just always something queued up to listen to, and it's been I think is the most popular. Audio is becoming the most popular platform there, but video and written word are still pretty powerful. And each of those has a different demographic associated with them and reaches different audience or complementary audiences. But I think it's also important to be authentic. I mean, if you're a good writer and you're interested in writing, then write, and don't forget about everything else. If you enjoy talking on video and doing videos, stick to video. Focus on what you believe you're good at, and don't get out of that. Don't do things that there's a degree of just being your authentic self. I think that's important. I particularly like audio, so I'll do podcasts all day as guests or otherwise, and I really enjoy it. And I do less video because I'm not as, let's say, natural at it as some others. So I think it's a balance, but do what feels right at the end of the day.
I want to go with somehow a last question. Do you think that the somehow B2B worlds should pay more attention to emotional marketing as a lever of trust from the deciders you're targeting? And is it also true for the industrial world? I think trust is a major aspect when we talk about complex sales, B2B sales. We know that for sure. And I think some big companies in the B2B world are still doubting. They are still being very corporate in the way they communicate on social media, on videos. They don't want to hire a community manager, I mean, or senior community manager because it costs money. Industrial worlds, you need someone who is legitimate, who knows the business, who knows the codes. So, what do you think about the place of emotion? Do you think we should do more in the B2B world to make it less boring somehow?
Yeah, I think less boring and more human. I mean, people are human beings at the end of the day, and they come to digital and social as humans, and you have to treat them that way. And that emotion can mean many things. I like to think of it as being funny and fun and interesting, and people appreciate that. People want to be informed, but they also, frankly, want to be entertained. Even at work, even in a work context or an event. And so marketers, to get that attention, should take advantage of our human nature and be funny and irreverent and not worry necessarily about being politically correct every minute, and do things that are a little bit out of the box
So taking
and not
risks,
worry
taking
about
risks
and
somehow.
taking risks, and then measured risks, and then measuring the impact of those risks, but always looking to experiment.
I'll share in the description of the podcast a few B2B campaigns reference that I like very much from Kuka, from other companies who did very well at trying to entertain people. I mean, I always say that when you work in the B2B, we should not accept to be bored just because, it used to be boring. And I think also that we should be able to share with a kid of ours one of our work video, and he should understand it, or he should be at least laughing at it, or I don't know, it should generate emotion at him. And now I
Yeah,
will
and
surely not.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's inspiration, there's excitement, there's all kinds of emotions you can appeal to that are positive and that work particularly well. And in cybersecurity, a lot of them are appealing to fear. that's that's another emotion. So you might argue that's not the best way to market, but that's a reality of our world these days. So you have to recognize human behavior and human emotion.
I think it's a very good conclusion to end with human emotions. I like it. It was not planned, but that's the best conclusion we could get. One final tiny question. This is the easier of the podcast. What is the best way to follow your work, Evan, for those who wouldn't know you?
It really is Twitter, and I know there are mixed views of Twitter, and people are skeptical, and rightly so, about Twitter. But if you eliminate the 99% of the nonsense on Twitter, there's a really good 1% left. Then you can find me there at Evan Kirstel or LinkedIn. I'm very engaged, and so look forward to seeing you there.